Why is your screen on?
What?
Why is your screen?
I mean, I can turn it off.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I don't believe they're saying anything yet.
Definitely. Okay.
It says mute.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Looks like Jason's on, Rich.
Awesome. So I'll probably just give it a minute or two, just to see. I was just sending out a reminder email right now. So just give us a couple of minutes, as we have people join, and then we'll get going. Thank you.
Hi, Jason.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Excellent.
People still piling in.
Perfect.
Let's see if we can get to a third page here.
Is it okay if I?
Make sure there's nobody seeing.
Now I can't do it. I'm one.
So as we get started, we'll probably ask everybody to put themselves on mute until we open it up for questions.
Mhm.
Rich, you're gonna be recording, right?
Good reminder, Eric.
If you want to make me a co-host, I can. I'll record and then I can cut it up. The 2 parts. Let's see if we. This is a test of the Zoom skills from Rich. There we
Okay, I'll
go.
stop from this one.
Now,
All right,
what are
perfect.
some?
Then I can put people on mute.
Are you gonna record or am I gonna? I'm gonna record.
No, I'll record. I'll record it locally, and then I'll slice and spot. I'll slice it up to 2 parts.
Slice it and dice it. Okay,
Yep.
sounds good. All right. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. Really appreciate it. This is a special topic Zoom. My kids are running around like crazy upstairs, of course. So I apologize if there's any noise in the background. I'll mute when you don't need to hear me anymore. So tonight we've got a 2-part special topic Zoom. The first part, we're delighted to have Jason Powell joining us, who's a doctor of physical therapy and clinic instructor at Star Physical Therapy in Redwood City. One of the things we've talked about a lot as coaches is how to manage the load for our players. Obviously, they're so scheduled, have a million things going on. We try to learn as much about what they're doing in other sports. Sometimes it's difficult. And then even just within soccer, there's so much soccer, there's more and more soccer, there's more tournaments, there's more practices, there's more games, there's less rest and recovery time. And as parents, speaking, myself too, you don't know what is too much. And, then often we think it's not enough. And we have maybe FOMO where we think, oh, we need to put them in this, we need to put them in that. So just to get an expert in and talk about, the development of youth players and how overuse can impact them and rest and recovery is something we wanted to put together. So Eric knows Jason from Sacred Heart as well, where he's a high school baseball coach. And he very kindly volunteered his time to come on and talk to you guys. So we really thank Jason for that. And then once we get through this part 1, we'll give you guys an opportunity to listen to Jason, ask some questions. Then when we'll go into part 2, some of you can jump off, or you can stay on if you're interested. We're going to talk about just preparing for high school tryouts. Obviously, winter tryouts start tomorrow, so there's a lot of our soccer players going into high school tryouts this week. And we just wanted to give you kind of a coach's perspective, what we look for, how to put your best foot forward, and really just provide a little bit of advice and maybe answer any questions generally about the process. So that's the plan for tonight. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Jason, who can take it from here. Eric, if you need to jump in, feel free at any point. But over to Jason. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Hope you can hear me. Very happy to be here and help out with this. Just first, and this could be for one of you guys, as far as the audience goes, am I address? I know it's soccer groups, but is it males, females, both genders right now?
Both.
Both. Perfect. Okay. So we will talk as far as soccer injuries go. We're looking, the primary injured area for soccer injuries is going to be the knee, followed by the ankles, the hips, and then the fourth, which maybe is surprising to some, probably not to others, is head injuries as well. So the big, kind of sexy topic, which I will spend a little bit of time on giving you guys some stats and things, is ACLs. This is what you see predominantly in adolescents as they're maturing into preteens, teens, and definitely in the high school world, where we're getting you're at risk for significant ACL injuries. Year-round play with both sports like soccer and basketball, the studies show that you have a 5% chance of an ACL tear for year-long play in a particular sport, particularly soccer and basketball. So adding up those times, which they did, I mean, that's 20% likelihood or chance of an ACL tear throughout your high school career, which is fairly significant. And then unfortunately, when we talk about training, when we talk about in-season training, preseason training, and ramp ups and ramp downs, the data is that less than half of those types of injuries return to their pre-injury levels. So the point being, it's not that you can't, and you see hundreds of examples of people and elite athletes and players returning to their pre-level. But if we can prevent these injuries before they get started, you're going to be in much better shape moving forward and having a successful career for whatever your level and goal is, whether that's to be competitive on your high school team, your club team, or future play as well, collegiately, professionally, semi-professionally. And, you know, soccer is definitely a sport that people play lifetime. And so we want to make sure everyone's geared and ready to play and be able to play that sport throughout the course of their life. That's really important to the players and to our kids. So typical risk factors associated with, you know, ACL tears and knee injuries, as well as some ankle injuries in general. There's anatomical factors at play. Females are typically more at risk than males, and that's because they do have wider hips. They also have shorter ACL. The ligament itself has proven to be shorter typically in females versus males. Hormonal changes. So especially as we're going into those preteens and teenage years through high school, we're typically in females seeing increased levels of estrogen, and that's going to increase tendon laxity. And so those tendons and those ligaments become more lax, leaving you at risk as they have to take on more forces. So we're getting stronger, bigger, faster, stronger at those ages. Muscle imbalances. This is true across the board. We typically see quadriceps are a lot stronger than hamstrings.
Injury part.
I'm
gonna-
that goes into the other one.
Yes.
So what we typically see is quadriceps are much stronger than hamstrings in teenagers as well as adolescents. So we need to create a better balance in that musculature through the lower body. We also see improper landing, cutting, and deceleration techniques. And then finally, poor conditioning. So as we play longer into games, as we play longer into seasons, as we transition into a high school season, which Eric can definitely talk about, and most people can see it in the high school ages, you're playing 5-6 days a week nonstop for several months. And then we're also seeing kids, you know, not do necessarily a proper ramp up into that type of season. They're either going full steam into the season, and then once season's over and club picks up, we're going full steam into tournaments. And tournaments can be really aggressive on our athletes. So, you know, again, I'm spending a little more time on ACLs. Really translates.
If it's a paper one, like that one actually looks paper. That's compostable.
Yeah, it really translates
Is there
into
plastic dip in
our
there?
lower body and upper body injuries. So the great thing about this is that ACL prevention programs, proper training, proper conditioning has shown to reduce the risk of ACL tears by 70%. So there is an answer to this issue. And it's about so that gets into what can we do and what do these ACL prevention programs look like. So the first thing is strength and flexibility. In high school ranks, you do start to see strength coaches. Some schools have much better strength and conditioning programs than others, much stronger athletic training programs. But it is something that we want to take on individually, and you want to be in charge of your own health and gearing as to what you're feeling. So strength and flexibility. For flexibility, we're really looking at hip flexors need to get more mobile or more length on them. The hamstrings need to get more mobile. This is especially true in our male players. Male teenagers have very short hamstrings. When you're kicking the ball as hard as you are and trying to take off and chase these balls down, you see a lot of soft tissue injuries in those hamstrings. And the third one is those calves. So to get into those ankles, we want to really make sure that we have good length in our Achilles tendons. And that comes from generalized calf stretching. Strength. So on top of that, strength and flexibility is critical to soft tissue injuries. So that's muscles, that's our tendons, which connect the muscle to the bone, and our ligaments as well. So strengthening these, getting into our hips. This is something that's very often neglected in our younger athletes and players. Hips that means our butt, and that means our hamstrings. Most soccer players have very little issues with quadricep strength. This is true professionally, with youth kids, and especially in the teenage ranks. Our quads are generally strong enough at this phase. You've been kicking the ball thousands of times. You've built up strength to kick the ball with those distances. But as we get imbalanced, so as the data shows, hamstrings typically aren't strong enough and glutes aren't strong enough. So we have our kinetic chain that goes from our, hips and our core into our hips to our knees to our ankles. So when we're looking at the three main injuries in soccer that you're going to be seeing, knees, ankles, and hips, well, ankles and hips both being stronger in those areas will reduce pressure and force at those knees. That's going to take force pressure off your ligaments, so your ACL, your PCL. It's also going to reduce how much load is going to be put on the joints themselves. That keeps our joints healthy for a lifetime of sport and play. So we want to look at getting our butts in particular stronger. The next aspect of these typical ACL and strength training prevention programs is making sure we're doing proprioceptive work. So proprioception is the fancy term for our body's awareness of where our joints and it is in space. So it's balance. It's understanding where's the pressure in my feet, where's the pressure in my knee, where's the pressure in my knee and my hips, and having all of those work together to turn the muscles on correctly and in the right sequence. So our training typically wants to involve some unstable surface work. That's balancing on softer surfaces, on, soccer balls, balancing on physio balls or BOSU balls, things like that. And these you'll start to see as you gear up into more school-based play where that is available and accessible to us. So we want to be taking advantage of that. And then the third part is plyometrics. So that's jumping and deceleration training. Jumping happens a lot in soccer, especially with headers, especially with free kicks and plays. So as we're jumping, some tidbits to help you guys think about this. We want to be practicing landing on the balls of our feet. This is something too for the female athletes and parents of females. Females typically land flat-footed or on their heels a lot more. That reduces force pressures. That results in meniscus damage. That results in ACL tears. So as we're working on our jumping and play, we want to be on the balls of our feet, and we want to have focus on, a soft, quiet landing. And then we want to be practicing landing on bent knees. So we want to absorb these contacts. And the more we build these habits with our training and with our warm-up programs, the more that's going to translate into what we do on the field. And it's going to become habit. So you're going to be in a safer place to reduce those injury risks. And then the last thing we want to do, in particular with our warm-ups and our cool downs, is actually work on our cutting, our pivoting, our change of direction moves and demands. So that's with dynamic warm-up routines. That's getting the joints, getting the muscles used to what's going to be happening at play. And so if we can incorporate those kinds of things into an adequate warm-up, into an adequate cool down, you're going to be able to excel a lot more in your play. So it's performance-based, but it's also injury prevention. And that's going to be a really important factor on what we want to do. And so the last thing that I want to talk about, and I'm happy to answer lots of questions about more specifics on what we can do, maybe what does adequate, warm-ups, cool downs, things like that look like, as well as management. But I do want to talk about concussions and head injuries. They are becoming more, it seems like they're becoming more frequent. They're not necessarily more frequent, but there's more awareness, so they're getting diagnosed a lot better. There's the management of concussions is also something that is really accelerating at a pretty rapid pace. And there's a lot of new evidence coming out about how to manage these concussions. University of Pittsburgh does fantastic work on this. There's a lot of information coming out of them. There's a lot of fantastic docs in the area who are getting much better at concussion management. And we're hoping to spread that word and make sure concussions are more actively managed. And that's the key to this. So when there are concussions, we're learning that active management, just like our ankle, knee, hip, back injuries, is really important. Having someone sit in a quiet room is no longer the case. I hope this isn't novel information for some of you, but we no longer want people just being shut down, taking everything away. Now, in the near immediate, there might require increased rest and things like that. A concussion does involve, it's a low-grade brain injury. So we need to recover from that. But then we need to expose our athletes in a graded fashion to help them return to play faster and to help them remove some of those deficits. So I just want to continue to promote awareness for those concussive injuries. And physical therapists are a frontline defense for that, for what we call vestibular rehabilitation. And so when these things do happen, and, we want to be active with our management. We want to push our doctors to make sure we're getting the right kind of care. It's no longer just rest, you'll be fine, let it recover. It's we need to re-expose and re-expose our athletes in a graded fashion so that they can get back faster and reduce their likelihood of future injuries or being able to manage those symptoms proactively. Then they can continue to stay in the classroom and keep their grades up, and they can continue to do the things they want to do with their sport and play. So, I've talked a little bit with Eric about kind of what we want to do here. So that's kind of what I wanted to, I hope I addressed a few things you guys were want to hear and have kind of piqued your interest on things, but I'd love to open it up to some potential questions and go from there. I don't know if there's anything else, Eric. You guys.
So I want to have a couple of conversations before we open up. So the topic, the heading is right. Overuse, hit, and injury, right? And so I was hoping you could address how much is too much. How much, what do we see without actual injuries, but because we have fatigue, you see people aren't as sharp. I mean, especially in baseball, you see that arm velocity is low, right? So maybe you can address what's required for things like downtime, what's required for change of pace, right? You don't have to stop activity, but what does that look like?
Yeah, so there's evidence is coming out on that, especially overload training and things. But what's most important, each individual is going to have different abilities, different tolerances of what their load is. The most important factor is that they can't be, and young athletes especially, can't be going 100 miles an hour all the time. So within games, within practices, we need to be able to moderate our activity levels, pick our spots. Drill work is very important, but drill work does not need to necessarily always be done at full game speed. That's why we do individual drills. So individual drills are really important. That allows us to regulate ourselves a little better. And so you want to see practices ideally regulated too, where there's some more competitive inter squad group broken down into then a break of individual training. That can be individual drills, that can be footwork, that can be some conditioning type demands. That could be some strength or flexibility work, and then getting back in. So we want to continue to kind of keep our levels a little more moderate. And so we do a higher intense demand, and we can't just keep following that higher intense demand. We need to then give our kids a rest break. What is too much in the grand picture? So, too much is hard to say. There isn't a line on that, but there is a line as, younger kids, 8Us, 10Us, 11Us, 12Us, should not be necessarily expected to do the same as high school athletes, as our mature bodies. So it becomes somewhat individualized to our athletes. Where are they at physically with their maturity? Are they, skeletally mature? Are they near their growth phase? Are they later in their high school years versus earlier in their high school years? So we should not be expecting the younger kids to keep pace with the older kids. That's one of the reasons for JVs and varsities and different rules on play and participation and expectations, is that, there's a big difference between a freshman in high school and a senior in high school. And you've seen that. So we want to, be conscious and be checking in with our individual athletes. For parents in particular, that means, not necessarily, hovering, but checking in. Does my kid need a break? Is he or she complaining about certain, areas, or, oh, my feet continue to bother me. Oh, my calf keeps getting tight. Oh, my, knees getting sore. That means our body's asking for some kind of rest. Now, that rest break doesn't necessarily mean a big shutdown. It means I need to be proactive with my coaches to help me manage that. And coaches can then, they have the tools. They know what is the goal of the team, what's the goal of that individual, and they can try to cater certain drills or things to that. So especially with individual drill time. So rest is important. You're looking at, in high school, that day off that you get, it's typically Sunday. That needs to be a day off, an actual day off. It doesn't mean, oh, I'm going to go get extra work in. The body needs time to rest and recover. Typically, our high school practices are enough. If our coaches are doing a solid job of, implementing drills, strategy, competitive play to get the athletes involved, that should be enough. So in season, we typically don't need to be doing a lot of extra work. We can do that extra work in the off season when our practices are broken up more. It's not necessarily a daily practice. So that means you can spend that time doing other things.
Yeah,
Does
I thought it was
that help?
interesting. I think it was interesting. I mean, I think you can't emphasize the point enough about adolescence, right,
Mhm.
and puberty and the changes that are happening. But I think Rich has a comment or a question before I get to the general code. Rich, did you have something you look like you were itching to say something here?
No, not really, but I did
Okay.
really pick up on the point of like 8, 10, 12s shouldn't be doing as much as high school athletes. And it just seemed to me like as a coach that you kind of maybe grading up a little bit as you go a little, you know, you go a little bit higher and the body starts to develop a little bit more. So, you know, just having that a little bit less is more kind of attitude for the younger ages, and then making sure they get their rest and the recovery, and then building up a little bit more as you're getting towards the high school athletes kind of seems to resonate and make sense for me. I don't know if that was kind of what you were saying, Jason.
Yeah, that's absolutely what I was saying. You know, everything we're doing, each of these stages is meant to build up on the next. And, you know, it's really hard to see, you know, you're not going to be peaking, or you don't want to be peaking at 10, right? And the expectations need to be different on we're continuing to improve at each stage of what we're playing. So we need to be setting goals. Coaches need to be setting goals. Parents need to have kind of goals, and the individual players need to have goals too. I mean, yes, fun is important, right? And that's ultimately what we want. We're playing the sport because we enjoy it, or because the kids enjoy it. But what do we want to work on with this season, with this team? What kind of skills do we want them to get? You know, what type of experience do we want them to have? Not just player fun, but are we playing some more competitive teams? Are we also playing some teams that maybe, you know, we maybe vary a little bit on what type of tournament we're in, or who are our scrimmages against, so we can work on things? Because it's truly about development. And we're always trying to develop all the way through. That's what our professional teams are doing. That's what our collegiate teams are doing. That's what we're trying to do with our high schoolers. So I coach baseball. You know, our goals for our freshmen are very different than our goals and expectations as well for our seniors, on what we're asking them to do and what we want to see from their first day, you know, in January to their last day in June. So we're expecting to see changes throughout the season, and then we're expecting them to take different steps throughout each year. And this should be true in a soccer program as well, especially one like this, where, you know, what are our goals for our 8Us? Do we want them to is it about getting them more playing time? Is it about getting them, you know, seeing some tougher competition, but also the ability to work on the things we're doing, like understanding spreading the field more, understanding, you know, having more plays developed, right? Or is that more, you know, is that what you're trying to do with your 10U team? So I think in a lot of this, it's about goal setting for the coaches, for the program, and for the individuals. What do I want to be able to do with this season? And you can break that down into, you know, I'm not sure, you know, what your club season necessarily looks like, but, you know, where are we starting with this, and where are we trying to finish with this? And yes, we want to win. Winning's really fun, and the kids are going to respond really well to winning. But are we developing all these players? What they look like at 10 is not going to be what they look like at 14 or 15 or 18. And we don't know, and this is especially true for you parents and coaches, we don't know who's going to develop, who's going to mature differently. It's amazing to see, you know, these teams in high school want to be completely competitive and have their team set their freshman year and expect that to be their, you know, seniors team. You don't know when kids are maturing what their body's going to do, respond to injuries, things like that. So we want, especially at these younger groups, to be thinking long term. And then as we build and continue to get competitive, you know, who's changing, who's progressing. So everyone needs that chance. That's where playing time's important. That's where developing players is important. We've had kids in high school that they come out, they've never played baseball before. We're teaching them how to throw and catch. And by senior year, they're a starter. And that would have never happened. So without us giving them that opportunity. So providing those opportunities for players is really important, and sharing the field time, because each kid is going to you know, some kids are going to be more advanced early. Other kids are going to become more advanced later as long as they're given those opportunities. And that's not a competitive thing. That's about building your program, right? That's
Sounds
about
like it
helping.
sounds like the BU way there, Rich. Right?
Yeah.
That's what we talk about all the time,
Yeah.
Jason. I don't mean to
Yeah.
cut you off, but
Yeah,
I want to
no.
open up for questions. If you guys have
Yeah.
a question, there's an icon at the bottom where you can raise your hand, and I'll do my best to moderate here as I go
Perfect.
through this. So the first question is going to be from the Metzler family. Just another real quick, Jason. I think looking at the list of the people who are on, I think it's mostly middle school to sophomores, just to
Okay.
kind of understand what who we're addressing here. Go
Okay.
ahead, Metzler family.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you have any advice for dual sport athletes. Like our son and some of his teammates have played both soccer and run cross country through middle school, might continue to do both through high school. I know in the spring there are some that do baseball and soccer. What advice you have for avoiding overuse there?
Yeah, so that's actually excellent that they play two sports. It's going to help the body rest, and so that is a active recovery system. So when we talk about, when I was talking about risk factors for injuries, and we look at poor conditioning, conditioning, there's soccer specific conditioning and being ready to play, but there's also just overall health and conditioning. Are you going to get fatigued? Your cardiorespiratory system. So being able to challenge different.
Real quick, I should be clear. Like they're doing both in the same season. So
yeah. So I was going to get into that part too. So challenging different systems throughout the year is part of development. So we encourage people to play different sports or to have an off season. As far as doing it in both in season, that's where, it's kind of up to the individual, but where rest days are important. So if you're really taxing yourself with, for example, cross country and soccer, where there's a lot of cardiorespiratory conditioning during soccer practice is going to be a little less important if you're already doing a lot of cross country work. So ideally, we can talk to our coaches and say, he is doing a lot of this stuff. Can we individualize some drills differently? And it's puts a lot on coaches, because they're starting to, we're talking about, that's what professional teams are doing, right? They have a group that need to work on this and a group needs to work on this, or, that injured group is doing something else. The whole team comes together for certain parts of practice, but then we can break it down into smaller groups. And we can look and say, it's important for coaches to know what are their athletes doing, right? So then they can say, okay, let's break into some smaller groups and let's try to identify what are these kids needing and doing. And then that goes into, baseball and soccer at the same time. When you're in high school, it's a lot harder to do it. You're allowed to, but it's really hard. And so you're asking a lot of the kids and the coaches to help manage that. But, being active in setting expectations for the athlete and then being communicative with the coach so that they understand what it actually looks like, or really it's encouraging the athlete to talk to the coach. The athlete really needs to be the one discussing their issues with their coaches so they can try to manage, what does practice look like? What are our expectations for the season? And where is my focus?
Thank you.
All right. We got a question online, just real quick. Let's see. If your kid has a mild nagging pain, knee pain or foot pain, how long would you recommend they rest for until pain is totally gone? Question mark, or just ramp down a little bit? Or I would add a third one, which is modified activity.
Yeah. So what I would do, depending on it, welcome to the world of physical therapy and medicine, where the answer is always, it depends on the individual. But Typically what we would want to do is just load down. So we wouldn't necessarily want to stop activity initially. We'd want to decrease either frequency or intensity of demand. So that's when we get into, okay, we're going to do these drills, but I'm going to do it at an easier percent. Or, I've been playing 4 days a week. Maybe I drop down to 3 days a week and give myself an extra day of rest. Or we can go, Monday, we play Monday, we take the next day off, and then we come back to it. So that would be the first step. If the issues don't go away, then we need to look into a harder shutdown. And typically that is about 2 weeks to see if those symptoms disappear. And hopefully they should, because if the stimulus isn't being applied, the symptoms shouldn't be there. The important part of that is when you return after 2 weeks, you don't jump right into 100%. You need to re-ramp up. You can start closer to 50% of overall volume or demand, and then each week you build on that. And that's what I would say would be the most ideal way to manage some of these nagging injuries.
Thanks you, Jason. Anybody else have questions either online or raise their hand or anything else? Questions. Okay. So I'm gonna just give I know Jason's dedicated a lot of his time for us. Just gonna give him a free plug here. Star Therapy and Redwood City. Not that he needs business, because every time I go in there, they're like packed to the gills. But starptrwc.com, located on Woodside Road. I think I've currently got 3 family members seeing him right now, because they've been banged up and overused and everything else. But if you need help, you can always go check it out. Okay.
And Eric can confirm with his family, I don't shut them down. I hate shutting people down if we can avoid it. So like to that last point, I ramp down and then work our way back up. But we are sports and ortho based, and we're happy to answer questions, and you can reach out to us and we can try to manage it until we can actively see you as well.
Yep. One more question. Let's see, hold on. A couple of questions here. Sorry, they're starting to come in now. Any recommendations for when to begin weight training?
Yes. So body weight exercises, working on technique can be done at a decently young age, so preteen, but we are not putting weights in hands yet. The research really shows, right as you're getting into high school is a great time to be finding the weight room. That doesn't mean you haven't been exercising, at 13 and 12 and 11, or, working on squat form. That can easily be implemented as part of practice, and should be, because it's an important part of technique and injury reduction. But yeah, I would say weights should be getting into hands and things starting around 14 and right in high school.
Recommendation for somebody who has Osgood-Schlatter's. It's very common.
Yeah, very common. So start strengthening the butt and hamstrings first, and the calves. Get stress off the knee. So first start strengthening those other joints. The next part of that is foam rolling. Roll out the quadricep, roll out the hips. That's going to be really important to help manage that Osgood-Schlatter's. Ice after play. Ice is okay, especially after, if you've sweated, it's a good time to put ice on it if you're dealing with an injury.
And sports like swimming help to avoid injuries in soccer?
Any form of cross training or staying physically active is important.
It just started.
Swimming, if you're practicing other strokes and, you're doing some breaststroke, you're doing some backstroke, it's a great form of exercise. It's not necessarily going to help, your soccer performance, but it is a good way to kind of reduce stress or strain and stay active. So it's kind of a good way to have an active recovery day as you're working into it.
Yeah, so everything you said is pretty much along the. We're a little different from most clubs. We don't really play 48 weeks out of the year. We have off seasons. We have different trainings. We actually encourage our younger players to play other sports, right? Because again, more statistics show that if you play more sports, you build different parts of your body, right? And we really reduce load. So everything you've said so far is right along Rich's Belmont way, right? One other question we have here: where's a good place to learn more about modern concussion management? Urgent care usually tells us dark room, quiet, blah blah blah. Right?
Yeah. So this is a plug for my wife's clinic, but they started something called the California Concussion Institute, and they are out of Santa Clara University. They're affiliated with Santa Clara University, the Earthquakes, the Niners, and Giants. It's West Coast Sports Institute is really the docs. So yeah, the CCI, but West Coast Sports Institute there. They are outstanding. And like I said, the guy who started West Coast is the concussion specialist for the Niners and Giants and Earthquakes. And he's their internal medicine doc. They're all sports medicine docs, but they are the guys to see with a concussion.
All right, so I'm gonna cut it here because we've taken 45 minutes of Jason's time. Jason, on behalf of Belmont United, thank you very much for coming. It's really important. It's a really important topic.
I'm happy to help, and I'm happy to be a resource. So if you guys have other specific things you want to do in the future, let me know. I hope it was useful for everyone there. And, we touched on lots of different things. We can break all of these things I've talked about down. So, I know it was nonlinear, but unfortunately injuries are nonlinear. Rehab is not always linear. So I love talking this kind of stuff, and I'm happy to get into details with you guys as you need.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. Really appreciate it. Talk
Happy
to you
to,
soon.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to it. All right.
All right. We'll see you soon, Jason.
Definitely.
Okay, guys. So hopefully that was some useful information for you. And if you have any follow-up questions, you can certainly send them to myself and Eric, and we can contact Jason for those answers. We wanted to get into talking about preparing for high school tryouts. So this will probably only take about 15 minutes, so we should still be off by 8 o'clock. Feel free to jump off if this isn't something that is in your world as yet. But obviously for a lot of our players, it's right on the doorstep because high school tryouts for winter start tomorrow. And it's a period of high anxiety for players, for sure. And we kind of just wanted to give, without going into, we can't really go into specifics of how exactly things are going to look at different schools because it's slightly different at every school. But what we can do is provide some insight from a coach's perspective, for the players to kind of put their best foot forward and give themselves the best opportunity, and also sort of provide some kind of like reality on the situation. There's going to be a lot of players trying out for, in certain schools, there's a lot of players trying out for not a great deal of spots. So what to focus on, how to put your best foot forward, and how to prepare for the tryout, and then also what might come after the tryout. So, just my background, I've coached in high school for a number of years on the boys' side. back on the East Coast. And then also did a season with girls last year at Notre Dame. Eric has been, well, why don't you tell us what you've done, Eric? Because
I've been at Sacred Heart for 9 seasons now, coaching on the girls' side, and so yes, it's along with all the other things that we do here. Um, we see a lot of girls throughout this season, and of course, I've had 4 kids that have gone through all the sports tryouts, right? And so, yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of take you through some of the key points from what I see. I'll let Eric kind of chime in with anything extra that he has or anything I might miss. And then we'll be happy to answer kind of general questions. So, like I say, it is a period of anxiety. You're going into a new situation. So it's not Belmont United anymore. There's other kids, there's kids from other clubs, there's coaches that you don't know, there's kids that you might not know that well, there's older kids, which particularly provides extra anxiety. I think probably the most important um, advice I can give is just for players to focus on what they can control. So, you cannot go into tryouts with your aim of I want to make the team. Okay, because you cannot control that. There's ultimately nothing you can do about that decision that is being made. What you can do is control kind of your actions and your behavior. You can't control, you know, interactions with other players. There's but you can ultimately control your behavior, how you act, and hopefully, your mindset coming into the process. So the first thing I would say is like dismiss this kind of notion of, okay, my goal is I want to make the team. Obviously, everybody wants to make the team, and maybe that is the ultimate goal. But what are the things that I can do to help me ultimately achieve that? Or if I don't achieve that, give myself the best, put myself in the best position to do so, and know that at the end of it, if I don't make it, ultimately I couldn't control that situation, but I feel like I did everything I could to put myself in the best situation. So that would be the kind of the first bit of advice. I would say that it's difficult from a high school coach's perspective. Uh, we go in, we're also have some anxiety about the situation. We know we're going to see a lot of players in a short space of time. We worry that players are not going to get, ample time for them to be looked at, which is certainly something that is going to come into it. You have a lot of players to whittle down in a relatively short space of time. Um, and that is tough as a coach. I mean, certainly last year, like I was going into day one, day two, and then just kind of coming away and thinking like, I still don't know the names of all the kids. Waking up at night and thinking, why do I still not know who Katie is? Or, things like that. So it's really, really difficult from a coach to kind of not get to know every kid. You don't have the length of time that you need to. So it is difficult from us. What I will say is because of that, and because of human nature, is that we can we will at times kind of make decisions quickly. And sometimes it doesn't, the player doesn't get the length of time that they need to kind of show what they can do. But because knowing that is that the players should give themselves the best opportunity. So if we see players that are focused, are actively listening, engaged, are energetic, are trying to be a good teammate, are trying to lead by example, are consistently working hard. Those players are gonna reflect well upon the coach. Now, conversely, and I know a lot of this is wrapped up in the anxiety of the situation, but conversely, some of the things that I personally, don't like to see is um the boys and the girls, they'll tend to stick in with their little groups because it's safety, right, in numbers. So they'll have their own little group. They'll kind of stick together. We'd much rather see somebody kind of be their own person, kind of stay away from their friends, stay away from their little clique, just, be separate, be focused. Don't be afraid to work with different people. Don't be afraid to go into a situation. Obviously, you might be afraid, but be willing to put yourself into a different group, not just stick together with your friends, not have little chats with your friends. I certainly want players to carry themselves. What I say to particularly the girls that I coach now is please just carry yourself with confidence when you go into the tryout, because a lot of the players will have a negative mindset, which is I'm not going to make the team or I don't think I'm going to make the team. And they will already kind of walk in there um, with their shoulders slumped and their head down, and they're not carrying themselves with confidence. Now look at that from a coach's perspective, right? If ultimately when you're in high school, particularly at the high school at the varsity level, you're trying to win. You're trying to have the best record that you can. So you want a player that's going to carry themselves with confidence and build confidence and have that gravitate through the team. So ultimately you are looking for players who are kind of, maybe faking it until they make it. So there is some form of that kind of attitude that you need to go in. I know that anxiety can kind of manifest itself in different ways, and sometimes that might manifest in, you know, uh, flat-footedness or slow movement, or, nerves can kind of do that to you. But one of the big things that we're going to be looking for is a player on the balls of their feet. Are they ready to play all the time? Are they active rather than reactive? Um, those are the kind of players that you want on your team. Remember that the high school season is a slog, right? You're training or playing 5 or 6 days a week for 3 to 4 months. You want players that are going to bring positive energy, that are going to bring energy every day. You don't want players that are going to be flat-footed, standing around, um, because that that means you have to bring more of the energy, right? If you have those players around you that are just buzzing and energetic and focused and naturally kind of bring that to the table, those are the kind of players that you're gonna want. Even if those players are not on your team, you're gonna want them in your practice group and around your practice group. Um, and then I think, you know, I would just be very, very careful of comparisons and comparing yourself against other people. One of my favorite sayings is that comparison is the thief of joy, and it's not about anybody else, right? It's about you, um, and you giving yourself the best opportunity to be selected for the team. And if you are, great, and if you aren't, then that's fine. We'll go on to that next, but it's not. You shouldn't feel kind of less of a person compared to somebody who does make the team, and you shouldn't be looking at other people and comparing yourself to them. Just look at yourself, give yourself the best opportunity to make it with your body language, with your attitude, with your focus. Do the things that you are good at. I say this in the young tryouts for Belmont United. Don't try to be something that that you're not. You know, show what you're good at. Every team needs different personalities, different characters. We need great tacklers. We need good passers. We need good dribblers. We need people who can shoot. We need people who can communicate. We need people who can run forever. We need people who are going to be great influences around the group. We need leaders. We need quiet leaders. We need loud leaders. Like soccer teams and the chemistry of soccer teams is made up by all kinds of different people. So don't try to be something that you're not, but just try to be the best kind of version of yourself. And try to eliminate those negative thoughts, because the negative thoughts are gonna um, are gonna really affect performance. Um, and then whatever happens, remember you cannot control this situation. And we've had numerous situations over the years where we've kind of been flabbergasted that a certain player didn't make it or this didn't happen. Um, which is always tough, but you know, how you kind of react to it and how you kind of deal with it is a real test of character too. So I I think any coach would respect the question of of thanking a coach and then asking for feedback. You know, hey, thank you so much. Like I really enjoyed this 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, whatever it may be. Um, you know, can you give me some feedback on what I can work on, so I can go away and, focus on it and try to get better and try to come back next year or whatever the case may be, or go back to my club a stronger player. So I think certainly asking for feedback is really positive and will reflect well on the coach and also will help you to improve. Staying positive, you know, soccer is a game of opinions. Everybody has different opinions on different players. Even within Belmont United, we have, even though we have a shared philosophy and a shared curriculum and what we want to see from players, we still know that, every coach has a slightly different opinion on player. And that might be shaped by, mainly it's shaped by your experience of the game and maybe how you played. I've certainly had coaches who thought I was everything from great to terrible. Um, and I had to kind of deal with that, and figure out ways to deal with that. Obviously, it's so much better when you get a coach who thinks you're great, but that's not going to happen every time. Um, so also understand that coaches, we're not a blank slate. We do carry biases and things into it. So every coach is going to be slightly different. So it's just another facet of something you can't control. Um, get that feedback. Just even though you're going to be disappointed if you didn't make it, you know, try not to get too down. Like just maybe think about what can I do? Just throw yourself back into it, honestly. Just take it as motivation. We all know players who haven't made it, have been cut from teams, have gone on to do great things. So really just, if you need a day or two to reflect, certainly, but then just get back into it, get working hard. If there's activities and clinics we can throw on in the winter for players that don't make it, we've done that in the past, and I'm sure we'll do it again. You can join other teams, you can keep touches on the ball, you can play pickup, you can, there's a million ways that you can keep improving and keep working hard on your game. And yeah, just keep moving forward. And then if you do make it, great, but that's not the end of the story, right? The end of the story, you're only as good as your last training session and your last game. So every day go with a positive mindset and try to train, try to be the hardest working player in practice. Listen to the coach, put your best foot forward. You can't control you know, what they pick. You can't control who makes the first 11. You can't control who's on the bench. You can't control your playing time. You can ask for feedback, but you can control how hard you work and your kind of mindset and attitude every minute of every practice, and that's what will really count for a coach. Eric, would you
Alright,
like to jump in with anything before we?
yeah, I do want to chime
Have
in
any
with a couple
questions?
things, right? And so just to really impress upon everybody, right? There is no, you don't have a second chance for a first impression. Right. So I'm kind of supporting a lot of what Rich has already said. You walk in, you're in your clique, you go, whatever, right? We're looking for across everybody. If we're depending on what school you're at, you could be looking across 50 people, you could be looking at around across 100 people. And you might only have 3 days, 3 days to try out before the first cuts. And depending upon the school you go on to, like I said, they might have cuts, they might start trimming down day 2, day 3. All right. So first impressions, be joyful, be passionate, play it as hard as you can, be positive. I've made cuts where I'm like, this person might be better, but I like this person, right? I like the heart. I like the way that they play. So just kind of like I said, be your best self. This is a job interview. You've got maybe 15 minutes of viewing time from the coach potentially before they start making decisions. Right. It is absolutely a numbers game. Okay. And it's absolutely there's some political things go on as well. Right. Good example. The coach might not be able to take everybody from a particular team, right? That might show favoritism, so they have to take other people, things like that. Okay. Um, just a kind of pro tip: you have a chance, go up to the coach. Hi, my name is Eric. Having a great time. I'm a freshman. Um, this is all kind of cool and new to me, and I just want to make your acquaintance, something like that, right? Just say hello if you have a chance. Okay. We cannot be afraid as we go into high school to be able to talk to your coaches. Okay. No high school coach wants to hear from any of their parents. They want to hear from the kid and the player. Okay. So practice with your coaches now. Ask the questions to your coaches that you have currently. Carry that through to your high school coaches. And then, like I said, just do your best. And if it doesn't happen, that's okay. If it does happen, don't denigrate and don't dismiss your teammates who didn't make it, right? Because you're going to go back to that team at some point and you're going to all play together. So, and it is fun to play for your school. It's a different experience. But again, do your best and have no regrets, right? Just go out, have fun. If it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, there's always next year. Questions. We had some here on the questions, and it's like, what do they do with goalkeepers? My experience, they always separate the pure goalkeepers and they work them out separately. I was gonna go back to Rich's. He didn't know all the names of the girls, so we at Sacred Heart we actually have a roster with pictures and their names and their years, so we write notes on those things. So tip for Notre Dame next year.
So, I mean, the question about the clubs, you know, I I will be so I'm just not interested in clubs. To
And
be
what?
I'm not
Oh,
interested in what club the kid plays for. I actually would not want to even know, but I am not a typical high school coach. So unfortunately, some of the coaches will ask what clubs the kids
well, they
play.
always ask what club they're on, but I think the question is, do they reach out to the coach? And I said rarely, right? So I would never reach out to a club coach and say, hey, what do you think about this player? Unless I was like friends with them or something, right? Um, oh, so yes, they do,
Does
but they do ask. We
Yeah.
all ask. We all ask.
So we were like, I know for us, I would have a list of the players attending and what club they played for, but then I just don't want to bring in club, and that would be one of the things I would say to the girls and the guys before is I don't want any club kind of biases or affiliations here. This is a clean slate for everybody, and um, you know, I don't care kind of who you play for, and I don't want to see the kids kind of like in those cliques of like hanging out with their club teammates and stuff like that, because that can affect chemistry on a team. So I would certainly, really be against kind of getting into the club stuff, but I'm sure it certainly does happen. But again, that's not something that you can control, so I wouldn't really lose any sleep over it.
Right.
What happens if the tryout coach ignores the child after they've asked for feedback? My older daughter wrote the coach an email, asked for feedback, and went to the practice, and she was told that there was no feedback. So just really poor form from the coach. Um, I can't understand why a coach would do that.
So here's my indication on that is that um you didn't make an impression and he didn't know who you were.
It's possible.
That's what I would say. And so remember what I said earlier, if you have an opportunity to introduce yourself, right? And naturally when people are coaches or meet a player, they kind of it sticks out a little bit more and they might take a look, right? And then they can have hopefully, right, some feedback. But
Yeah, if I may,
agree that they should be able to be responsible enough to have some feedback. Go ahead, Ojan.
yeah, I think every school is really different. So I've been I coached at Carlmont since 2015. Last 2 years I've been at Notre Dame. And it's not like the boys versus girls thing that's different. It's private school versus public school that's different. So for example, Carlmont, when I was coaching there, the underclassmen, the JV and Frost tryout, I mean, we had up to 120 kids, right? I mean, we only have what 40-ish spots available for Frost and JV probably put together. So there was probably 80% of the kids didn't get feedback on why they got cut, or the feedback was kind of short and sweet. And bottom line is there's not much time. You would lose opportunities to evaluate the players by going through each individual. And so there's a big variance in that. So I think, each program is different and has its own challenges and has its own opportunities. But, most of us go to Carlmont, and Carlmont, it's a massive, massive tryout pool. And that sort of limits the coaches in terms of what they can do and how much they can do. And then the other thing is, in case people don't know, but high school sports, it doesn't pay nearly as much as, kind of what club does. So a lot of these coaches, I'm not saying they're volunteers, but chances are they're probably not making enough to even pay the gas that they're traveling. So a lot of the time and effort that they're putting in is totally on their own. And then in some other cases, it may be a teacher. When I was at Carlmont, I was lucky enough to be a paid coach, both in Belmont United and be more experienced than I would say some of the other coaches at our other league schools. Like some of them were teachers. They never ever coached soccer in their lives, but they needed a coach and they stepped up. So I'm just kind of defending some of the programs here and some of the challenges they face. And those are some of the struggles and reasons why they may not be able to give as much feedback as like a club environment, which is totally different. Anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, no, that's really useful. I mean, so let me ask you this, Ojan, from someone who has done this in a public school environment, like, this is just kind of a coach to coach question, and I've probably asked you this before, but like, how the heck are you cutting down from 120 kids to 40 in 2 days? And like, how are those decisions being made? Because clearly, some of those decisions are going to be wrong. There's no way you can get everything right in that scenario. So, how are those cuts being made?
Yeah. So I think based on what you said earlier, I used to always say, like, I'm going to make a mistake, guys. I'm sorry. Some of you probably deserve to be on this team, and I'm going to cut you. And it could just be that 15-minute window where you played the absolute worst soccer you've ever played in a month. And that's all I saw of you, or that's the most I saw of you. And then a kid that is probably not at your level had the best moments of his, entire career the whole time I was watching him. And, that's the difference. And so I would transparently say that, we're going to get it wrong. It's not as, you know, foolproof as what we do at club. And I think that's really, the biggest challenge, especially at the underclassmen level. In terms of what we do, it's also what you said earlier. I think, primarily I was looking for players that could fit into our culture, that have the right attitude. One of the examples I love to give about players, that may not, make the team in their first year is we had a player named Leo. And my second year, we went to the CCS finals. This player was player of the league, one of our 3 players that made first team all league, and he got cut freshman year. But attitude, effort, everything was absolutely top. He engaged with the coaches. All the coaches knew him by name. He tried out next year, even though he got cut his first year. And honestly, he just hit a growth spurt. That was it. He was a bit short his freshman year, and he hit a growth spurt, and then he turned into the first team all league. The other thing that we did was also those players that had the right attitude and that fit our culture. We offered them manager spots. A manager spot, I don't know if all schools offer this, but essentially, I don't think you get credit. You're not able to suit up, but you are able to practice with the team and join them in all the team events as like sort of bystander. We had several of those players that joined the manager position and eventually transferred to be a full-time player next year. So attitude and culture, that was the 2 main things we were looking for.
Yeah, and then I assume, it goes back a little bit to what I said, that every coach looks for slightly different things, but maybe within that program there's certain kind of player profile that you're looking for, and then there's kind of your individual bias. So it might be that some coaches are looking at technique first and foremost. So how do you handle the ball? What's your ball familiarity like? Are you comfortable with the ball? Some coaches might value athleticism, right? So they're looking at strength and speed and agility and things like that. Some people, some coaches might be really looking for attitude, right? And who stands out, who's going to be a leader, who's going to be a positive role model on the field, and then kind of game knowledge too, and there's always positional sides to it too. You know, um, you need to take a certain number of defenders, you need to take a certain number of midfielders, you need to take a certain number of attackers, and that's why we try to play players in different positions at the youngest ages, and so that they have some adaptability going into high school scenarios. Because if you can play 2 or 3 positions, that could tip you ahead of somebody else if you are, kind of level with somebody. So, and then again, it can be a combination of all of that, right? All of the above kind of just thrown in a little bit. So, attitude, you know what? Their attitude's really good. Their technique's not great, but it's not bad. That just edges you ahead of this player whose technique maybe is a little bit better, but oof, their attitude kind of seems off and they're not really a team player. So there's a lot of variables that kind of go into it. And it is different with every coach, but that's yeah, that's really useful. Oh, thanks for chiming in. Okay, guys. I think we're getting on to, well, what time is it now? 8:15. Feels like 9:15, doesn't it, for some reason? Uh, like we say, we really want to support players through the process, and be around. We've been there when kids make it, kids don't make it, kids have positive seasons, kids have tough seasons. High school season is also very different from club. Like the style of play might be very different. Your position might be very different. Um, it's a very much kind of like win at all costs, particularly at the varsity level. It's not as much development as you see in club. There are different pressures that come along with having to win, but there's also so many positives of playing with your schoolmates and representing school pride and things like that. So, yeah, keep in touch with us, and if you have questions throughout the process, feel free to reach out to us. I think that's what you know, we want to provide. It's not just, you know, being in our club, but it's also everything else that goes along with it. So you're still part of Belmont United. We still want to help you out. So yeah, reach out to us if you have questions, and we're always happy to chat, particularly with the players if they want feedback about how things are going in high school. Eric, anything to finish up with?
No, it's good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great evening. See you on the field soon. Good luck this week to the high school players.
Thank you. Have a good